with
Yeah,
board
I'll try my best to help Tom and pull John in as needed.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board for the National Register of Historic Places. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm currently chair of the review board. The board's purpose this evening is to consider the nomination of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. As most of you know, the National Register is a federal list of those places deemed worthy of preservation. A nomination form has been completed for each of the properties that will be considered tonight. Each nomination form has been sent to the review board members, and each member has had an opportunity to study it prior to this meeting. The owners of nominated properties, local officials, and interested local groups have been notified of the meeting. All have been invited to send written comments about the nomination and to attend this meeting. Some of you may wish to speak this evening about a particular property. You are welcome to do so, and I encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether the property meets the criteria of significance of the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which the review board will evaluate the nominations. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. These criteria have been established by federal regulation. Copies of the criteria have been sent to owners of the nominated properties and to other parties I mentioned earlier. A description of the National Register program has also been sent to them. Each of the nominations will be presented by a staff member. Persons viewing the meeting remotely will then be given an opportunity to comment. These comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The State Historic Preservation Review Board will then discuss the nomination, and a vote by the board will follow. Should a nomination be determined this evening to meet the criteria for inclusion in the National Register, the nomination will be forwarded to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong. Should she agree that the property meets the criteria and that the nomination is in proper form, she will sign the nomination and forward it to the National Register office in Washington, D.C., where it will be reviewed once more. The process is a lengthy one, but it is calculated to subject each property to rigorous evaluation. We will begin the meeting with the attendance roll call. As I call the names, please indicate your presence, introducing yourself briefly, stating the role you fill on the board, and your particular expertise. We'll start with Board Member Dyer.
Hi, good evening. I'm Lindsay Dyer, and I am member at large. I work for the Historical Society, MNHS Sites Capital Art Program Supervisor. Also librarian, archivist, and public history. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill.
I just don't have any sound.
Hi there. I am Bethany Gladhill. I am a member at large, new member, beginning tonight, so very excited to be here. I work both as a consultant for arts and nonprofit organizations, but also in historic preservation, holding my Master's of Arts in Historic Preservation from Goucher College. And I'm just thrilled to be here.
Welcome. Board Member James.
Hi everyone, my name is Elliot James. I use they, them pronouns. I am one of the historians on the board, and I am assistant professor of history at University of Minnesota Morris, and I contribute to the programs of African and Black American Studies and Gender, Women's, and Sexuality Studies.
Thank you. Board Member Koski.
I am Philip Koski. I serve in the position of a historical architect, and I'm a practicing architect in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Board Member Lavasser. Okay. Board Member Mann.
Hi, my name is Rob Mann. I am the historical archaeologist on the board, and I am a professor of anthropology at St. Cloud State University.
Thank you. Board Member Sanders. Oh, or not. We'll come back to him. Board Member Sanders.
I'm sorry, Chair Anderson. Tom was able to rejoin and he thought that he had sound, but we're not hearing him.
You're not hearing me?
Oh, there he is. Hi, Tom.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I'm a brand new board member at large, and I'm an archaeologist and interested in preservation.
Excellent. Welcome, Board Member Sanders. Board Member Schulke?
Hi, Chris Schilke. I'm the Executive Director of the Otter Tail County Historical Society. I am a public historian.
Thank you. Board Member Solomonson?
Hello, I'm Kate Solomonson. I'm an architectural historian and I teach architectural history in the School of Architecture at the University of Minnesota.
Thank you. Board Member Stark?
Hi, I'm John Stark. I'm a historic architect on the board and practicing architect in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Board Member White? Frank, you're muted.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Good evening. I'm Frank White, and I am a board member at large.
Thank you. And Board Member Worcester?
Good evening. My name is Mike Worcester, and I'm the Executive Director at the Morrison County Historical Society in Little Falls. I am one of the historians on the board, and I have a career in local history and public history. Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome to the board.
Thank you. I'm new,
Steve?
if you can't tell.
Yeah. Steve, did I blow you off on the list before? Board Member Olson. Board Member Olson.
My name's Steve Olson. I'm a member at large. I am a practicing bridge engineer, and tonight it's important that I'm also a grain farmer, a corn and soybean farmer.
Thank you. Board Member Lavasser, one more try on that one. Andrea, are you here? Okay, and I am Board Member Anderson. I'm one of the architectural historians. I teach art history and architectural history at Augsburg University in Minneapolis. All right, thanks everybody for that. And we will move on to the report from Amy. All set?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone. I am Amy Spong, the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. Just a couple housekeeping things, and I do have a few announcements as well. Just a reminder that we are conducting this remote meeting pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.015. We are no longer in an emergency health pandemic scenario, but we also haven't yet transitioned to a hybrid format for our meetings. But one of the things we've also found during this time of conducting these remote meetings is that it has increased accessibility to our meetings for a lot of people, and we've had a lot more public comments and interests, and I'm also seeing a couple of our tribal historic preservation officers on the call on the meeting this evening. So I just want to welcome them as well to this meeting. So and welcome everyone. Quickly, I'd like to just introduce, we have several SHPO staff at the meeting behind the scenes and in front of the cameras as well. We have John Disher, who's our grants and communications manager, who is working on all the WebEx, helping with some technical difficulties and just kind of monitoring things for us and lending a hand wherever he can. We also have Michelle Decker, who is taking minutes for this meeting and does a lot of the behind the scenes work to prepare for this meeting and to get materials to board members and afterwards to submit materials to the National Park Service based on the recommendations coming from this board and the deputy SHPO, myself. We also have Jenny Way, who is our National Register historian and architectural historian, presenting all of the nominations this evening. And then we have David Mather, who is our National Register archaeologist. I did forget to mention before I was introducing everyone that a couple of the things that we need to ensure while we are having this remote meeting is that all members need to hear the discussion and one another, that a roll call be taken for all votes. This is because of our remote meeting. And then finally, that members of the public can also hear and participate during the public comment portion. And I would just ask, we had it on the screen at the beginning of the meeting. I would just ask that if you do want to speak during the public comment portion of each of these nominations, we'd ask that you put your name in the chat and which item that you would like to speak about, and then, or you can also raise your hand. There's really two ways that you can ask to present some public comment. I would also ask that the chat function only be used to introduce yourself or to state that you would like to speak. Do not provide any public testimony or comment on the chat. We want those to be presented verbally during the meeting, and the meeting is also being recorded. Okay, my final housekeeping note is just to remind all board members to please turn your cameras on when you are having discussion. Certainly not during the presentations, but while you are discussing and providing a vote. And if public have the camera tools and resources, I would encourage to use cameras too while you're speaking, if you can do that. So I just have a couple updates that I wanted to provide as well. Some of these are maybe a repeat from our last meeting in November, but we do have a few new members. So I wanted to just remind folks again of a couple things. I did provide a bit of a staffing update at our last meeting, but I'm very pleased to say that for the first time in the history of SHPO, over 50 years old, we have hired a second archaeologist on our team. So in December, Lucy Harrington started with our office, and she is going to be focusing mostly on environmental reviews, the compliance portion, as well as helping us with some GIS work and data management for archaeological properties. This will also allow our National Register archaeologist, David Mather, to focus more on National Register nominations. So we are very pleased, and I think David is very pleased about that as well. The second announcement, and I'm going to put this link in the chat, which I think is maybe fitting for some of our conversation that's going to be happening this evening. The National Park Service is seeking comments on their revised National Register Bulletin 38. Its guidelines for evaluating and documenting traditional cultural properties. This has been a long time coming, and the publication provides guidance for identifying, evaluating, and documenting traditional cultural places that are significant in American history, architecture, engineering, archaeology, and culture at the local, state, and national levels of significance. The Park Service is hosting a whole series of listening sessions regarding this bulletin, and they are seeking the comments. The comment period closes on April 30th. So we will not, the next time we meet in May, this comment period will have passed. So I'm going to provide this link. The listening sessions are all listed on this link. There are, and it's very clear which ones are for TIPOs, tribal consultation, which ones are for SHPOs, specifically federal agencies. And then there are 2 public webinars that are being held in March, and there's a registration link for all of them. So I'm going to put that in the chat if anyone is interested and would like to contribute. SHPO staff, several of us are participating in the listening sessions, and we will be also providing comment by that April 30th date. And then finally, just a reminder that David Mather, our archaeologist, has been working with the Lower Sioux community, TIPO, Cheyenne, St. John, about a joint meeting in May a joint state review board tribal meeting to consider the update for the National Register nomination for the Lower Sioux Agency Historic District. And as far as we know, we're not aware of other SHPOs and tribal communities doing this kind of a joint meeting. So we're trying to figure out what that all looks like. And so I just wanted to give those a heads up that that's what our next meeting could be quite different. And more information to come on how that's all going to work. David, did you want to add anything at all, or?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. We're working out the details to hold a joint state review board and tribal council meeting, because that historic district is partly within the TIPO boundary and partly without. So this is, as far as we can tell, this is a first in the nation in terms of a review board meeting, and we're very excited about it. So thank you.
And that concludes my comments and updates.
Thank you, Amy, very much. The next thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from November 15th, 2022, our meeting then. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Board Member Stark, motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Board Member White, second.
Very much. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, time for roll call. Board Member Dyer?
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill?
Aye.
Board Member James?
Aye.
Board Member Koski?
Aye.
Board Member Mann?
Aye.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Sanders?
Aye.
Board Member Schulke?
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson?
Aye.
Board Member Stark?
Aye.
Board Member White?
Aye.
Board Member Worcester?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michelle, for all of that. And now we move on to the presentation of nominations with some instructions that some of you are familiar with, but just to make it clear, as we approach every nomination, you'll hear these instructions again. For each nomination this evening, we're going to use the following format. There will be a staff presentation of the nomination, followed by a summary of correspondence received. At that point, I will then call on people who wish to make a statement about a specific property being presented at that time. We ask that you use the chat function, or if you are unable to access the chat, raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak. If you do not use the chat function, please do not use the chat function for any other purpose this evening. As you've heard in the opening statement, we encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether the property meets the criteria of significance for the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which the review board will evaluate the nomination. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. The board is specifically interested in matters related to the criteria rather than the number of individual testimonies. Participants are invited to make one comment. Please keep in mind the 3-minute time limit for each speaker. SHPO staff will provide a verbal indication when your time is up. After the public comment, the board will discuss the nomination. Our first nomination this evening is the McMichael Grain Elevator in Harmony, Fillmore County. Ginny, are you there?
I am sorry, I had to find my unmute. Let me share my screen and we will be off. Are you seeing my screen now, Chair Anderson?
Oh, not yet.
Nope, not yet.
Okay, thank you. How about now?
Not yet.
Oh my goodness.
Unless your screen is all of us, then yep, we got it.
There it
There we go.
is.
There we go.
Success. All right.
Perfect.
So tonight's first nomination is the McMichael Grain Elevator in Harmony, Fillmore County. Robert C. Vogel of Pathfinder CRM LLC is the author. The McMichael Grain Elevator is located at 205 Main Avenue North in Harmony, Minnesota, a small community in the southeastern section of the state. Built in 1879 for the A&T McMichael Grain Company, the elevator is an example of a traditional wood frame country elevator. Here we see the 1898 plat map with a commercial corridor outlined in, oh, I'm sorry. Here on the right, we see the 1886 plat map. The McMichael Depot is circled in red, and at left is a current site plan. The elevator building is in the center. The elevator is comprised of 4 primary sections: the workhouse, head house, drive shed, and storage bins. The design emphasizes function over form, and there's very little in the way of exterior detailing. The internal grain bins are crib framed and have a total storage of 10,000 bushels. Originally covered with wood shiplap siding and wood shingles, the entire structure is presently metal clad. On the left is an overview of the historic property and setting, aerial view to the southeast. At the right is a circa 1900 photograph of the elevator, camera facing roughly northwest. You can see the elevator's relative distance to the Harmony Depot and the former railroad route in both images. The basic functions of a country grain elevator were to receive, store, and ship grain harvested on local farms. The grain arrived at the elevator in a farm wagon, or later farm trucks, that were unloaded into the receiving pit. The grain was then conveyed to an elevating leg, which transferred it into the elevator's internal storage bins. At left is a view of the east elevation, camera facing northwest. At right is a view of the south elevation, camera facing northwest. Historically, the building also housed important office functions related to grain marketing. In addition to grain handling, elevator operations included various sideline business ventures. While no as-built plans or original construction records are known to exist, the elevator owners would likely have employed a professional superintendent for the original construction. Most, if not all, of the McMichael Company's lines elevators probably share the same basic design based on more or less a standardized plan. On the left is a view of the drive shed in west elevation, camera facing east. At right is a view of the drive shed in north elevation, camera facing south. The McMichael elevator was the westernmost of 3 grain elevators erected along the railroad siding in Harmony between 1879 and 1895. The principal commodities handled were wheat, barley, oat, and flax. During the 20th century, their operation shifted from grain handling to processing animal feed, and all 3 elevators eventually developed important sideline enterprises, including livestock shipping, feed milling, and retail sales of coal, seed, salt, and other merchandise. At left, we see the interior view of the bottom of the grain bin showing crib board construction, and at right are the head house spouts to storage bins. The elevator was designed to provide economical bulk storage for wheat and other agricultural products in separate but interconnected wooden bins. Consequently, most of its volume is taken up by the 12 grain storage bins, which provide a storage capacity of about 10,000 bushels, or roughly 600,000 pounds of wheat. The 3 bins at the west end of the workhouse were apparently added after the elevator was originally built, most likely in 1911. At left is an interior view of the workhouse framing. At right is the addition, the pier supports that support the addition. By the 1800s, most all the grain handled by country elevators in southern Minnesota were bought and sold. By the 1800s, almost all the grain handled by country elevators in southern Minnesota was bought and sold in bulk. The transactions were executed at the elevator, where prices, which fluctuated widely, were determined by market quotes from Chicago Board of Trade, which were communicated daily over telegraph. The McMichael elevator's trading territory probably extended over a 6 to 8 mile radius encompassing all of Harmony Township, as well as parts of the adjacent township. At left is the interior view of the fanning mill and working house framing. At right is the interior view of the working house floor, west extension with 3 additional grain bins. The curtailment and eventual abandonment of wheat growing in the Harmony area after 1900 led to the McMichael elevator's economic obsolescence. The elevator was offered for sale in early 1914. 2 years later, title to the elevator passed to a well-known Harmony resident whose family owned a growing grain and feed business. The family eventually acquired all 3 of the Harmony grain elevators and formed the core of the Harmony Agri-Services Incorporated. In 1977, the rail line through Harmony was abandoned, and in 2019, the elevator was donated to the Harmony Area Historical Society. At left is the interior view of the leg and working house floor, and at right is a view of the Fieldstone Foundation. The period of significance for this property is 1879 to 1977. The level of significance is local, national criteria A and C, and the areas of significance are agriculture and engineering. The period of significance for this property begins with the elevator construction in 1879 and ends when the railroad was abandoned in 1977. The property is being nominated using the National Register Multiple Property Documentation Form, Grain Elevator Design in Minnesota. The McMichael grain elevator is a well-preserved example of the wooden crib-framed country grain elevator. It is also associated with the broad patterns of agricultural and transportation history, specifically the development of the grain farming and railroads in southeastern Minnesota. For these reasons, the McMichael grain elevator is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There is no correspondence related to this nomination.
Thank you, Jenny. John, is there anyone waiting to chat?
No, I have no requests to speak for this nomination.
Thank you. Thank you. And last call, if anyone would like to make a comment. Okay, public comment is now closed. Do I have a motion to forward this nomination to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong, and recommend that she approve it?
Board member Schulke, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board member Solomonson, second.
Thank you very much. And is there any discussion related to the nomination? Looks like board member Olson has a comment, question, something.
Yeah, excuse me, I've got a couple things. One is the nomination talks about the busy season being from September through mid-November, something of that nature. And it also talks about the primary crops being small grains like oats and wheat and flax, which are harvested in late July and early August. And so I was wondering why it was busy later in the year than the primary crops were harvested. And I had a couple other questions too, but that was my first one.
Robert Vogel is, I believe, here. He might be able to answer that question better than I.
Yes, this is Robert Vogel. I'm the person who prepared the nomination. Based on the results of our research, it surprised me a little that the elevator was busy in the weeks after the end of the harvest. And it took a little while to figure out that, well, a lot of the grain was simply stored on the farms and was moved, of course, by wagon at about 200 bushels a trip. So that probably explains the delay. But the reports from the elevator that got publicized anyway really made it clear that they almost had nothing to do in July, but August, September, October, and then November were we're really quite busy.
So Robert, if I could follow up, I saw the graphics Pathfinder inserted and they were really helpful. I think it would be even more helpful, and maybe it's for a future grain elevator nomination because I can't really expand your scope here, but to just show the flow of grain from a drop-off wagon into the pit, up the leg into a bin, and then make the route from the bin through the leg back to a rail car would sort of tell the circle of grain as it moves through the facility, I think would be helpful too.
Oh, an excellent idea. We just sort of ran out of budget.
Yeah, no,
more than anything else.
And my last question has to do with weighing the grain. So you talked about them moving away from volume-based 3-bushel bags, if you will, to weighing the grain. Did they use a platform scale, or was it in the pit, or how did they perform the weighing?
They had a dump scale installed. I think it's in the 1911. We actually found a published reference to it. But there is no scale house. If there was another scale on the premises, I have no idea where exactly it was situated. It left no trace. Farmers' elevators, which are typically the ones built after the 1890s, they're the most common form that's still extant, usually have this specialized space for a large scale. And then some of them even have scales in the head house. But this one, it's a little enigmatic about how they did that. We know that they weighed some of the products, especially when it became a feed elevator. But
thank you.
Nobody alive remembers ever seeing it.
Board Member Stark?
Yeah, as Board Member Stark, I do like Board Member Olson's idea of the grain flow. I remember working on some large grain elevators, and that was really helpful in understanding the process and not having grown up on a farm, but having farming background in my family. It's helpful. I do want to compliment you on the way that the presentation is put together, and I especially like the little sketches of the elevations and the floor plan. Is very easy to understand and read. They're very helpful. And this is a elegant little grain elevator. Sometimes we promote the big, large ones, but this is just a small community and it's very intact still. So I really like it, really support it.
Well, it's by far the best preserved one I've ever recorded, and I've been doing this for 45 years. It's amazing. It never really had any substantial additions. The only other elevator built by the same company is in Spring Grove, Minnesota, where I live, and it has this other complex that was built on top of it in the early 20th century, and so it's you don't get a real idea for the silhouette, among other things. So yeah, it's a remarkable resource. I get to drive by it several times a week. So.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Yes, we've got Board Member Worcester.
Thank you. Being new to the board, I'm not sure if this is a question that's appropriate to ask, but were there any concerns on the part of staff about this nomination?
There were not. The one thing that we talked at length with the author about was the use of the multiple property documentation form in order to substantiate significance. Other than that, the nomination came to us really fully formed. We were very excited. I think Ralph, who I think spoke to us in chat and is also here, he is the representing the Harmony Area Historical Society, was the one that located the elevations and the plans that you so enjoyed, Board Member Stark. So it was a real group effort. We did not have any concerns.
Okay, thank you.
And it's completely appropriate to ask.
Questions or comments from board members? So it looks like we're ready to vote. Board member, oh, sorry. There's something I need to do, isn't there, Ginny? So if I can find it here, the motion before the board is to send this nomination to the Deputy State Preservation Officer, Amy Spong, and recommend that she approve it. And so now I'll take the roll.
Has there actually been a motion made?
There was a motion made at the beginning. Yep.
Okay.
There was.
Thank you.
Yep. And Board Member Koski, it's a little different from our regular procedure, so I can see how you might have.
All right, you caught me off guard.
Yeah, I'm catching myself off guard with all my new script here, so I'm working on it. We're getting there. Board Member Dyer.
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you very much. And now we'll be moving on to our next nomination. Just a reminder about our procedures. The staff does a presentation of the nomination, followed by a summary of correspondence received. At that point, I will call on people who wish to make a statement on a specific property that's being presented. We ask that you use the chat function, or if you're unable to do so, to raise your hand in order to indicate that you'd like to speak. Please do not use the chat function for any other purpose this evening. As you've heard in the opening statement, we encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether the property meets the criteria of significance of the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which the review board will evaluate the nominations. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. The board is specifically interested in matters related to the criteria rather than the number of individual testimonies. Participants are invited to make one comment, limited to 3 minutes. The SHPO staff will provide a verbal indication when your time is up, and after public comment, the board will discuss the nomination. Ginny, are you ready to go with Fire Station number 19 in St. Paul, Ramsey County?
I am, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is Fire Station number 19, St. Paul, Ramsey County. Lindsay Wallace and Aaron Q are from the 106 group are the authors. Fire Station number 19 is located in St. Paul, Minnesota, near the southeast corner of Highland Parkway and Snelling Avenue South and the northwest corner of Highland Park. At right is a boundary map of the property. And at left is the building depicted on a Sanborn map after 1930. The Mediterranean Revival style building was constructed in 1930 and displays restrained decorative brick and stone detailing, as well as the style's characteristic red terracotta tile roof. The building is set within a terraced landscape that increases approximately 30 feet in elevation from street level to the south or rear of the building. At right, we have a view of the north and west elevations, camera looking south-southwest. At left is a photo of the fire station in 1931. 3 of the 4 engine houses built in 1930 have been formally attributed to Clarence W. Cap Wigington, the office of the state architect's head draftsman and the first Black municipal architect in the United States. At left, we see the west elevation from Snelling Avenue, camera facing east. At right is the east and north elevations, camera facing southwest. Fire Station 19 is not formally attributed to Cap Wigington. However, it does feature the red terracotta roof tiles, patinaed coppered cornice elements, and decorative brick, much like Wigington's Highland Park Water Tower just south of the property. As St. Paul city architect at the time of construction, Charles Bassford is also associated with Fire Station number 19. At left is a view of the south and west elevations, camera facing northeast. At right are the south and east elevations, camera facing northwest. The interior of the building is one large room. In the northwest corner of the room, a cast, oh, I'm sorry. That's about a schoolhouse. My apologies. At right here is a view of the second floor hallway, camera facing north. At left is a second floor room on the east side of the building, camera facing east. Before the late 1880s, there were some semi-permanent Euro-American communities in the area of Highland Park, but city-led infrastructure development did not begin until after the area was annexed by the city of St. Paul in 1887. Streetcar tracks were laid along West 7th Street in 1891, but prospective residential settlement did not follow quickly. A handful of houses, inns, bars, and schools were constructed in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, but it was not until after World War I that the area of Highland Park grew. At right is a view of the first floor, main garage, camera facing north. At left is the same space, this time camera facing south. By the early 1920s, the city of St. Paul was investing in infrastructure, industrial, and recreational development that would drive and support residential settlement in the Highland Park neighborhood. In 1925, the Ford Motor Company opened their Twin Cities assembly plant, which created about 2,000 jobs and helped make the Highland Park neighborhood a desirable location to live. At left is a view of the stairwell, camera facing east-northeast. At right is the second floor main room, camera facing north. At left is a view of the second floor semicircular opening on the west wall. This may have held a fire pole, camera facing northwest. At right is the hose drying tower from the second floor, camera facing up, photographer facing south. The period of significance for this property is 1930 to 1958. The level of significance is local. National Register Criterion A in the areas of significance is community planning and development. The period of significance dates from 1930 when the building opened through 1958 when it was decommissioned as a fire station. Fire Station 19 has played an important role both in the development of the Highland Park neighborhood in St. Paul and in the expansion of St. Paul city services in the first few decades of the 20th century. For these reasons, it is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There is no correspondence related to this property.
Thank you, Jenny. John, do we have anyone who is signed up to speak, comment on this?
We have nobody signed up.
Okay, so this is your last call. If you're interested in making a 3-minute comment, this is the last opportunity to sign up to do that. Okay, public comment is now closed. Do I have a motion from the board to forward this nomination to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer Amy Spong and recommend that she approve it?
So moved. Board Member White.
Thank you, Board Member White. Is there a second?
Board Member Stark, second.
Thank you, Board Member Stark. And is there any discussion, any comment on this nomination?
I would like to make a couple comments.
Thank you, Board Member White. Go ahead.
In this nomination form, I'm actually working on an exhibit on Cap Wigington. One of the things that came to mind here is there are 2 other African-American people that worked in the office with him, one of them being Dwight Reed. And just for everybody's information, Dwight Reed would actually go on to become a Hall of Fame coach at one of the HBCU schools at Lincoln, Missouri. And I found that very interesting because I had not seen his name in any of the research that I had accomplished related to working in the office. However, in my other research, Dwight Reed stands out. He worked at Halleck U. Brown and a number of other small colleges. So I thought I would share that information as just an FYI to the members.
Thanks, Board Member White. Comments or questions? Discussion from the board? Thing? All right, assuming I haven't missed anything, the motion before the board is to forward this nomination for Fire Station number 19 to Deputy State Preservation Officer Amy Spong and to recommend that she approve it. So we, I think, are ready to vote. Board Member Dyer,
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill,
Aye.
Board Member James,
Aye.
Board Member Koski,
Aye.
Board Member Mann,
Aye.
Board Member Olson,
Aye.
Board Member Sanders,
Aye.
Board Member Schulke,
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson,
Aye.
Board Member Stark,
Aye.
Member White,
Aye.
and Board Member Worcester,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you very much. And we are moving on to our final nomination this evening. Again, a reminder of our process. Each nomination follows this format: a staff presentation followed by a summary of correspondence received. At that point, I'll call on people who wish to make a statement about the property that's being presented. We ask that you use the chat function, or if you're unable to access the chat, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak. Please do not use the chat function for any other purpose this evening. As you've heard in the opening statement, we encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether the property meets the criteria of significance for the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which the review board will evaluate the nomination. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. The board is specifically interested in matters related to criteria rather than the number of individual testimonies. Participants are invited to make one comment, limited to 3 minutes. SHPO staff will provide a verbal indication when your time is up. After the public comment, the board will discuss the nomination. Ginny, will you go ahead, please, with the Hiawatha Golf Course, Minneapolis, Hennepin County?
Chair Anderson, before I begin the presentation for the Hiawatha Golf Course, would it be okay for staff to address some of the consistent themes we've seen in the correspondence related to this property?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Just to clarify for everyone, the SHPO staff has a regulatory responsibility to review nominations as they are submitted. While the SHPO can guide the technical requirements and comment and make suggestions on the supporting documentation, the thesis of the document is determined by the authors and typically the nomination sponsor. The program does not require that the entire history of a site be explored in every nomination. The regulation only requires that a single criterion be adequately documented. The boundary and period of significance are determined by the scope of the nomination and are generally specifically related to the criteria and area of significance. Neither can be altered to recognize other uses of the property that are not associated with the significance being discussed in the nomination. SHPO acknowledges that there is a strong Dakota history in this area and encourages a nomination that explores the entirety of that significance and the area and time period to which it is related. SHPO staff would be happy to talk about that process with interested organizations. Listing in the National Register of Historic Places is recognition that a property is worthy of preservation. However, it does not dictate a future use of the property and does allow change given appropriate consultation under federal and state laws. The listing of a public property is one important aspect among many that should be considered during planning. I would now like to move on to the presentation, if it's okay with you, Chair Anderson.
Please do.
Thank you. Oops. This presentation is for the Hiawatha Golf Course, Minneapolis, Hennepin County. Charlene Royce, Katie Randall, and Elizabeth Gales of Hess Royce and Company are the authors. Hiawatha Golf Course lies in South Minneapolis in Hennepin County on approximately 140 acres of gently rolling terrain surrounded by early 20th century streetcar suburbs. Lake Hiawatha is also borders the golf course on the east. Minnehaha Creek flows through the course. The Minneapolis Board of Park Commissioners dredged Lake Hiawatha, then Rice Lake, and cultivated the land for a golf course between 1929 and 1931. The clubhouse was constructed in 1933 and designed in the Tudor Revival style by locally prominent architects and city planners. At right is the clubhouse exterior, south elevation, camera facing north-northeast. At left is the clubhouse in 1934. The primary resources and focus of this nomination are the 18-hole course and clubhouse. Despite alterations to the landscape and the clubhouse, the property maintains sufficient historic integrity in the opinion of the State Historic Preservation Office. There are additional contributing structures such as 3 bridges that cross the creek in 4 places. Non-contributing resources include the building and site associated with the Learning Center constructed in 1999. At left is a detail of the 1934 map and the original routing of the course. At right is a detail of the 2020 course scorecard. Hiawatha is a generally flat course with mature trees separating tight fairways and small greens. Character-defining features of the course include raised tee boxes, organically shaped bunkers, and natural water hazards created by Lake Hiawatha and Minnehaha Creek. Additional non-historic ponds were added to low-lying areas to mitigate flooding and were water historically collected there during heavy rains. Because the course is built on fill, the land is currently sinking and requires regular pumping to be maintained. At left is an elevated tee at hole 14, camera facing west. At right is an organically shaped bunker at hole 1, camera facing south. It was one of 5 golf courses developed by the Minneapolis Board of Park Commissioners in the first 3 decades of the 20th century, a time when the popularity of the relatively new sport of golf was skyrocketing. This was also a period during which discrimination against Black people was a strong and oppressive undercurrent in daily life. Minneapolis's Black residents were concentrated in few neighborhoods, including the South Side, near where Hiawatha Golf Course opened in 1933 through 35. The course became an important recreational and social amenity for that neighborhood. At left is Bridge 3, camera facing south. At right is hole 12, the green and the bridge across Minnehaha Creek, looking southeast. The clubhouse at Hiawatha was constructed between 1932 and 1933 by local builder Henry F. Olson and designed by local architects and city planners Carl B. Straves, William G. Dorr, Louis Bursback, and Rollin Chaplin. Described by Park Superintendent Theodore Worth as, quote, very cozy, end quote, the clubhouse was designed in the Tudor Revival style with elements of the contemporaneous Dutch colonial revival style. Both were popular residential styles in the surrounding early 20th century neighborhood. At left is the northwest elevation of the clubhouse, camera facing southeast. At right is the north elevation of the clubhouse, camera facing south-southwest. The clubhouse interior was renovated by local architect Robert A. Sunt in 1966 to update the kitchen, sales center, and manager's office on the north end of the building. The sun porch on the east elevation was enclosed then as well. These renovations and alterations to the clubhouse occurred within the period of significance. In 1992, the park board re-roofed the building and hired architect James Forberg to design a golf cart storage and garage addition to the north elevation. The addition is sympathetic to the rest of the building in style and materials. The sales center was also expanded with a small addition off the east elevation and connected to the rest of the building by the 1933 sun porch. At left is the clubhouse interior. Note the limestone fireplace, exposed trusses, and custom chandeliers, camera facing west. At right is the east elevation of the clubhouse, camera facing north. When they opened, white golfers formed private clubs affiliated with each of the park board's public golf courses. These clubs received preferential tee times and special treatment from course managers, who were typically both park board employees and active members of the private club. These private clubs essentially controlled the clubhouses, including social areas, locker rooms, and toilet facilities, restricting use of these purportedly public facilities by non-members. At left is a photo of the park board commissioners in front of the clubhouse on opening day. At right is a view of hole 4, camera facing west. While the governing regulations of the Hiawatha Golf Club did not explicitly discriminate, a new member had to be approved by a unanimous vote of the club's board. Hence, it was easy for clubs to deny applicants. While black golfers were allowed to play on Minneapolis's municipal courses, from the outset, they were denied access to the clubhouse and membership in the course's private club for decades. At left is the golf course in 1934. At right is a view of the Learning Center and the back 9, camera facing southwest. In 1952, the Twin City Golf Club, a group of black golfers formed in the early 1930s, led a civil rights struggle that resulted in fuller integration of the city's municipal clubs and courses, and the Hiawatha Golf Course became the harbinger of the change that resulted. At left, we see a view of the golf course from hole 13, camera facing northwest. At right is a photograph of black golfers taken in 1938. Only golfers who belonged to a club that was a member of the Minnesota Public Links Association or its sister organization for privately owned golf courses, the Minnesota Golf Association, could play in tournaments and develop handicaps. This was essential for aspiring golf professionals. The Public Golf Association required member clubs to be affiliated with a specific 18-hole course and allowed only one club per course. At left is the Learning Center, tees and driving range, camera facing north. At right is the golf ball vending machine shed, camera facing south. Working with civil rights attorney Howard Bennett, the Twin City Golf Club petitioned the park board to recognize the club at a city course and end racial discrimination at its facilities. Local, civic, religious, and civil rights groups supported the cause. After months of negotiation, the park board, private white clubs, and the Twin City Golf Club reached a compromise, requiring the private clubs to add non-discriminatory language to their bylaws. At left is Bridge 1, camera facing north. At right is Bridge 2, camera facing southeast. In addition, the private clubs agreed to support the Twin City Golf Club's application for membership in the Minnesota Park Links Association. A representative of the Twin City Golf Club was also added as a voting member to the association's board. As a result, black golfers were now able to acquire the requisite handicaps needed to compete in the sport as a professional or semi-professional athlete. In June of 1952, 13 members of the Twin City Golf Club teed off at Hiawatha in a local qualifying event for the State Public Links Tournament. At left is an advertisement for the 27th Bronze Amateur Golf Tournament in 1969. At right is the photograph of Negro Open Golf Tournament taken around 1950. Also in 1952, Hiawatha became the first park board clubhouse to be integrated when professional black golfer Solomon Hughes entered the clubhouse for the first time. This occurred as black golfers across the nation were fighting for equal access to municipal courses, clubs, and professional tournaments. At left, holes 2 through 4, camera facing north. At right is hole 6 with the clubhouse in the distance, camera facing southwest. Due to racial discrimination, the Twin City Golf Club never had a, quote, home, unquote, course, but its members adopted Hiawatha as their own. Members said it was where they felt most welcome. In 1966, after resisting pressure to do so for decades, the Hiawatha Golf Club became the first of the private clubs at the Minneapolis municipal courses to invite a black person to join. At left is the roadway next to Lake Hiawatha, camera facing west. At right is a drainage pipe beneath Fairway 7, camera facing north. The period of significance for this property is 1930 to 1972. The level of significance is local. National Register Criterion A, the area of oh my goodness, the area of significance is Black ethnic history, entertainment and recreation, and social history. Forgive me for not having that correctly on the slide. The period of significance, wow, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick. My sincere apologies. That slide did not get changed in my deck. I want to make sure I get this right so that y'all are able to make your appropriate recommendations. The period of significance for this property is 1952 to 1972. The areas of significance are entertainment and recreation, social history, and ethnic heritage Black. The level of significance is local under National Register Criterion A. The Hiawatha Golf Course is associated with Black golfing community's efforts to desegregate the sport within the city of Minneapolis. For its association with the civil rights effort, the Hiawatha Golf Course is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. As of 4 p.m. today, SHPO has received 59 pieces of correspondence related to this nomination. 41 pieces of correspondence support the listing, including the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Committee. 10 pieces of correspondence oppose the listing, and 8 pieces of correspondence, including the owner, the Minneapolis Park Board, neither support nor oppose listing.
Thank you, Ginny.
You're welcome.
If you've not signed up to make a brief comment, 3-minute comment, and wish to do so, please sign up to do so now in the chat. People will be called on in the order they requested to speak, and the staff will keep track of the time. Please unmute yourself, turn on your camera, state your name if you're invited, when you're invited to speak. If by the time your name has been called and you decide that you no longer wish to speak, please feel free to decline and we will move on to the next speaker. So, John, is there anyone waiting to speak?
We do. We have a request from Darwin Dean to speak.
Chair Anderson?
Yes.
If I may, before we have Darwin speak, there was a comment added in the chat from Leonard Wabasha, and he did have to leave for a meeting. So I am going to read the comment into the record because I know we were trying not to use the chat for this purpose. Unfortunately, Mr. Wabasha couldn't introduce himself, but Leonard Wabasha is the Cultural Resources Director for the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community. He officially is not a Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, but our office partners with him in a very similar capacity. We kind of look to Mr. Wabasha in that capacity. So I will read his comment. I wanted to comment on the Hiawatha Golf Course nomination. I am in support of cleaning up the area and are in support of returning the environment back to a natural state, and also to make an acknowledgement of one of Minnesota's First Nation people, the Dakota, who use this area, like others, as a place of gathering, foods from the water, and medicines as well. And then he continued, looking forward to future discussions with SHPO, if I understood correctly. And thank you for your time. And so we will be sure to reach out to Mr. Wabasha.
Thanks, Amy. And we have Mr. Dean first on the list. Just a reminder, if you would like to get on the list, now is the time to sign up for the chat. Mr. Dean, Welcome, and you have 3 minutes for your comment.
Good evening, and thank you very much for this opportunity to encourage you to vote yes or aye, if you will, for the nomination of Hiawatha Golf Course for the placement on the National Register. Because of its cultural and historical significance, it is a very important property to the community of South Minneapolis and Minneapolis as a whole. Many groups that we have spoken to are in favor of this nomination to move on to the National Register. So I will be brief and simply indicate that I did send in correspondence, which indicates everything that I need to say. But thank you very much for your consideration and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. John, are there others who have signed up to speak or raised their hands?
No, we have no other requests. And I don't, oh, I see one raised hand. Looks like Elizabeth.
Yep.
This is LeJune Lang on the phone. I would like to support the nomination.
There you go.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. And Ms. Gale, I think you're up next.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Gales from Hess Royce & Company. I'm one of the co-authors of the nomination. We do not have any remarks to make at this time, but we are here and available if the review board members have any questions about the nomination. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we are at the end of the list. So if you'd like to make a comment, please let us know right away. This is the last opportunity to comment on this property. John, anyone else waiting to speak?
Nope, that was the only request I had.
Okay. Thank you all for your input, and public comment is now closed. Do I have a motion to forward this nomination to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong, and recommend that she approve it?
Board Member Solomonson, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member Schulke, second.
Thank you, Board Member Schulke. In light of some specific comments on the nomination from the Minneapolis Park Board, the SHPO staff would like to recommend edits in the nomination prior to our discussion. Ginny?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I do want to note my sincere apologies about forgetting to update that important slide as we were going through my slide deck. I was concentrating on the narrative and of course forgot the technicals, which is ironic. John does have the updated slide deck and we'll post that on the website immediately after this meeting. So that will be available and corrected to anyone that would like to see it. Regarding the suggestions that staff have in relation to comments from specifically from the park board, staff would like to work with the author to add language about the subsidence of the course and addition of the berms within the description section. We would also like to determine the most appropriate nomination boundary considering the comments submitted by the park board.
Thank you, Jenny. Would someone like to move that we consider these two items as a friendly amendment to our original motion?
Board Member Gladhill, so moved.
Board Member Gladhill makes the motion. Is there a second?
Board Member Stark, second.
Board Member Stark, thank you. So is there any discussion related to this motion for the friendly amendment? Yes, Board Member Olson.
Yeah, I think if there are going to be some updates to the document, I guess one of the things I looked at when I looked at the document was how to protect our resources going forward, and the guidance the document has in it for the different contributing resources. And one of the things I found a little Spartan was the contributing bridges and what makes them contributing elements. And so they're pretty different from a Tudor revival style, if you will. And I did chat with Charlene a bit today, and their importance is in connecting the different parts of the course together. but if there could be some guidance on going forward, how to best be sympathetic to the course, I think that would be useful for the owner to have in hand.
Thank you, Board Member Olson. I appreciate that perspective. I think Charlene addressed the contributing, non-contributing nature of the bridges very well. It does have to do with their construction during the period of significance, and because it's a district, we did not discuss them in detail. The nomination documentation might not be the best documentation to talk about the future of the bridges and future design. That is more appropriately handled in design guidelines related to the property when and if it is listed. A National Register nomination doesn't necessarily speak to the future of a property. However, if there are some current design details that you feel need to be added to the description so that we can accurately understand what the bridges, how the bridges are constructed today, I would be happy to work with the nomination preparer to insert that information into the nomination.
That sounds great.
Thanks, Ginny. The mover and seconder for the friendly amendment, is that all right with you to add this to the little list that we've created of things that will be discussed with the authors?
Board Member Gladhill thinks that's fine.
Thank you.
Board Member Starks agrees.
Is there any other discussion about the friendly amendment to our original motion? All right, let's vote on that, please. Board Member Dyer.
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Can I abstain?
Yes.
Abstain.
Thank you. Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Now we have the original motion as amended in front of us, and time for questions or discussion. Yes, Board Member Worcester.
A couple of questions. I took a look before tonight's meeting after I reviewed the nomination form, and I looked at the list of National Register properties in Minnesota. And am I seeing it correctly that this would be the first golf course put on that list? Is that correct?
Liz, I would actually defer to you on that. It's the first that I have reviewed in the last 8 years, and there were none written recently enough that we determined them necessary for comparative understanding of how to write a nomination. Is there an older one, Liz, that you're aware of in Minnesota?
I am not aware of one that would be specifically just the golf course. I do think that the 9-hole golf course at Fort Snelling is within the boundaries of the National Register Historic District and the National Historic Landmark District, although I am not positive that that golf course is a contributing resource because it was modified due to the airport taking land and changes to that part of the fort in the mid-20th century. I am not sure, it does not ring a bell that there would be another golf course in the state. So yeah, that is a very good question.
So, because I'll tell you, I just took the list, I went onto the website and I just literally typed in the term golf course. And I found nothing. That's what I was basing my question on, which leads to my follow-up to that then. Nationally, are there any we're aware of? I tried to navigate the national list site, but I was struggling with that. So I was just, it's a point of curiosity because there's 400 golf courses in the state of Minnesota. And this struck me as a bit surprising that this would be the first, but maybe it shouldn't be surprising to me.
There are nationally recognized and nationally listed golf courses. Yes, I am unaware of any that have been brought forth to the State Historic Preservation Office for designation prior to this. As
And then
individual
follow up to that
resources.
is, what were the criteria that they were used, that were used for them, if there was any research done into that?
Liz?
Yes, we did do research and in fact looked at other nominations for golf courses to see how they were structured, especially the description of the golf course. Some golf courses were listed for their design because they were designed by a significant landscape architect or golf course designer. And so they were essentially a criterion C argument. There are also several in the United States, including municipal and private courses that are listed or on their way to being listed as also part of civil rights history and desegregation. And so we, in this case, that was the argument that we were looking for, the importance to the Black community in Minneapolis. So we looked at several of those nominations. Kate Randall.
That they think
Thank
we
you.
should get 5,000 a month for an apartment.
Deputy Director Spong has her hand raised. Amy, do you have something?
Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything additional to add as far as listed golf courses in Minnesota, but there are a few others that have been identified as being eligible for meeting criteria on the National Register in Minnesota. And that those typically often have to do with maybe road projects or projects that happened around or near those golf courses where they needed to be evaluated to a certain level in order to understand the potential historic significance that they have. So I think there are a few in Minnesota that have been determined eligible but haven't moved forward with official listing. But I would also add that the Hiawatha Golf Course is also part of the Grand Rounds in Minneapolis, and the Grand Rounds in Minneapolis has previously been identified as eligible for listing on the National Register under different, criteria, certainly.
Thank you. Board Member Schulke.
Yeah, I have a question, or I'm a little confused, so that's okay at my advanced age. So the golf, it's a municipal golf course, correct? Owned by the city of Minneapolis.
Owned by the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, which is a separate agency, but it's a public agency. Yes.
Who has spoken out against the nomination? And they're correct?
Jenny, I'm going to defer to you on this as you should oversee that correspondence.
No, they have not.
What?
They did not object to the nomination as the owner.
Oh, I thought the letter or the correspondence we got today, okay, never mind. Well, then forget it. That's my question. I thought, they was some objection to that municipally within the city. So how could it be nominated if they objected? But I must have read it incorrectly.
I can address your objection question. So
Yes.
if the owner of a publicly owned property objects to the National Register nomination, the National Park Service and the regulations and guidelines that are established under them allow for a listing of a publicly owned property over public objection.
Okay. All right. That's answers my question then, basically. Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Board Member Worcester, you had your hand up.
Chris, I think the one letter that I saw that came today was from a specific member.
It was just the member.
That's how I took that. Is that
Okay,
correct, Jenny?
so-
That was an individual member writing on their own versus speaking on
Okay.
behalf of the
So
board.
I'm not completely off base then.
Correct.
No, just a
You are
little bit.
correct.
Thank
Board
you.
Member
Mike.
The official correspondence from the park board itself, Parks and Recreation Board itself, did not make a specific statement objecting to or
Right.
supporting the nomination.
Correct.
They provided a substantial amount of other information.
Okay.
Let's see, Board Member Stark.
Yeah, as a non-golfer, I really appreciated, well, I've done it less than 10 times, let's put it that way, not understanding a lot about the game, but I really did appreciate the explanation in the nomination about the process of golfing, about how to become a semi-professional pro or and the handicap, that you really do need 18 holes, that you need a club supporting it. That was all really important information to understand, and it helps with the nomination, I believe, to show that it is eligible for the National Register. I just wanted to make a comment that that was a good thing to include.
Thank you, Board Member Stark. I'm sorry, Amy, you had your hand up and you maybe were going to comment on something earlier. Would you like to jump in again?
No, but I did, there was one thing I just wanted to have everyone, the board members and maybe folks that are on the call, on the meeting, that maybe submitted public comment after 4 o'clock today. So everything is posted on SHPO's website that we got before 4 o'clock today. There were a few additional comments that were submitted after that time. People can still continue to submit comments. And when we forward everything to the National Park Service, we will continue to forward whatever additional comments, including the comments we already have and that are posted. We'll continue to submit any additional comments as part of our Park Service submittal. So I just wanted, folks might not maybe see their comment letter potentially on the website.
Thank you. Board Member Schulke, you've had a hand up for a while. Is that left over from before?
Do I? No, I don't want to. I don't really have a comment, but I do want to thank the staff, Amy and Jenny and the rest of you, for really guiding us through we've had several quite interesting, controversial nominations, and I think you have done an excellent job of making sure that we stay on task and don't go off, on tangents. So thank you very much for that.
Board Member Schulke. Board Member White has his hand up.
Chair Anderson, I would like to follow up with Board Member Stark's comments. I think that the authors did an excellent job in sharing the history that is significant, again, to this nomination as it relates to civil rights and the denial of people being able to play golf. Or, excuse me, in terms of getting information related to tournaments, to handicaps, etc., but also being able to play on public courses that were tax supported. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member White. Any other comments or questions from the board? Board Member Gladhill.
I would like to actually follow up on those comments about the development of the history of golf and the sort of controversy in setting those up. It was setting up the use of this course. Those were very clearly defined. Echo my fellow board members' elements or discussion in that. Also, the discussion of the role of this particular golf course in the residential development of that area was well defined, and sort of provided the third leg of that stool for me to clearly understand how this particular area developed.
Thank you, Board Member Gladhill. Any other comments or questions from the board? Anything else? All right, the motion before the board is to forward this nomination of the Hiawatha Golf Course to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong, and recommend that she approve it. All those in favor?
Excuse me, Chair Anderson, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Would you mind repeating the motion with the friendly amendments as well?
I'll repeat the motion and I'll ask you please to repeat the friendly amendments, which you had the text of. So the motion is that we approve the Hiawatha Golf Course, Minneapolis, Hennepin County, or that we recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong, that she approve it and forward it to the National Park Service with, Amy, go ahead.
The amendment to direct staff to work with the author to add language about the subsidence of the course and addition of the berms within the description section, and to determine the most appropriate nomination boundary considering the comments submitted by the park board, as well as to add any engineering details necessary to understand the construction of the bridges.
Thank you. All right, are we there? Here we go. Board Member Dyer.
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Abstain.
Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you very much, everyone. So that wraps up the section on presentation of nominations. Excuse me. Yes, the nominations. And now we're moving on to other business, which is, I think, only the election of officers for the State Review Board. Our final piece of business tonight is the election of officers. Officers selected tonight will serve a 2-year term beginning at the next scheduled meeting of the board. I call on Board Member Koski, one of the members of the nominating committee, to brief us on their recommendations.
Madam Chair, the nominating committee has convened and recommends the following slate of officers. All nominees have confirmed their interest to serve if elected. They are for Secretary, Board Member Solomonson, for Vice Chair, Board Member Anderson, and for Chair, Board Member Dyer.
Are there any additional nominations from the board for any officer positions? Any additional nominations from the board? Right, nominations for board candidates now closed. A vote for the slate of officers will be taken by roll call. The slate of candidates is Lindsay Dyer for chair, Kristen Anderson for vice chair, Kate Solomonson for secretary. And I will find my list. Board Member Dyer.
Aye.
Board Member Gladhill.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, which means if you were counting, the ayes have it. The officers elect are Lindsay Dyer for chair, Kristen Anderson for vice chair, Kate Solomonson for secretary. The new officers will begin their terms at the start of the next State Review Board meeting, currently scheduled for May 16th, 2023. Thanks, everyone. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, looks like we have something from Amy before we adjourn. Amy.
Not so fast. When I was making my announcements at the beginning of the meeting, I forgot to call on my fellow National Register colleagues, and we remembered that Ginny was going to make a quick announcement on the most recent National Register nominations that have been confirmed by the Park Service.
Thank you, Amy, and Ginny in advance. Go ahead.
Yeah, I am pleased to announce that all of the National Register nominations that were forwarded by this board to Deputy Chippo and onto the National Park Service have now been listed in the National Register. Those include the Henry Hale Memorial Library, the John M. Poorbaugh Block, the District Number 3 School, and the Schroeder House and Livery. So thank you very much for your work.
That was from the November meeting.
that not what I said? It's been a good day.
I didn't catch it, but you may have.
You said everything that was in the pipeline, and that would include everything from November.
That was it.
Yep, that's good. All right, anything else before we get a motion to adjourn? That's it, motion to adjourn?
So move.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We're finished for the evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.